Thank you. Thank you all for joining us. Tony, thank you so much. I would never dare skateboard in front of you, even in my cool shoes with palm trees on them.
Oh, that's unfortunate. I have one in my car if you want to.
Maybe you can give some lessons later. Tony, you are the ultimate icon when it comes to skateboarding and in many ways also entrepreneurship. And one thing that struck me as I was going through this universe of brands and teams and companies and nonprofits you've created is this idea that you could have been a very successful skateboarder and had an amazing career. But you decided to do so much more than that. What was it that made you decide not to just be a skateboarder?
I think it was the idea that I could help skateboarding grow on a bigger scale, and it wasn't I wasn't setting out to make it a business. I was just setting out to raise the awareness for skateboarding. And really through video games was sort of the tipping point of skateboarding going from being sort of a novelty and a niche sport to truly a mainstream, as much as people don't want to use that word, a mainstream activity and something that parents encourage their kids to do and something that has a genuine opportunity for a career. And I realized that there was still this stigma attached to skateboarding that was outcast, it was rebellious, it was a negative influence, it was dangerous, and I felt like people were giving me an opportunity to speak about it. I might as well take that opportunity and show them how much good skateboarding can do.
What was the moment when you were just starting out that you said, okay, I want to get into clothing, I want to build my own skateboard line? What was that moment? Was there a mentor, someone who was advising you, or did you look up to someone as an example?
My best example was a guy named Stacy Peralta, who was my coach, who really was the one who recognized my talents early on and put me on a team of skaters that I thought was already the best team of skaters, and I had no place being on because I was a scrawny little kid doing these really avant-garde tricks that weren't being noticed very much. And so the fact that he believed in me was huge, and he had been a former pro skater and started his own brand and invited me to be on the team. So I was already very much wanting to emulate him in every way I could. And then when I chose to start my own brand, it was a weird time because it was at a time when skateboarding was in a lull of popularity. And I thought that my opportunity for being a professional skateboarder had sort of faded. And so I thought, well, I want to still be in this industry. I want to start a brand, even though skating was very small as an industry at the time. I knew that if it did come back, which I very much believed it would, that we would be sort of on top as a brand because we can establish ourselves now. And I had to go to Stacy, first off to tell him that I'm quitting his team, but also to tell him what I wanted to do. And he's like, I can't stop you. It's exactly what I did. So to have his blessing in that was huge for me. But after that, as things started really taking off, it was more just seeing voids in the market and stuff that we want to get into. Like I have 3 siblings. We all had small children at the time in the late 90s, and we couldn't find any cool clothes for them. I mean, everything was just like, you dress them up as little, little dolls. Like it was all Oshkosh bagosh, and it was like, we just want real clothing for our kids that look like the way we dress. And so we set out to make that. I mean, it was really just skate-inspired clothing. That's Hot Clothing, and that's been going on now for 20 years almost.
That's amazing. Now, before we go on, I just want to remind everyone to tweet your questions using hashtag #IconicTour because we will get to a Q&A at the end. So as questions come up during this conversation, please remember to tweet them. So you explained how clothing came up, and then now, of course, you have your own team. It sounds like you travel quite a bit with your team. And there are all these different businesses. How do you think of them as all being part of, Tony Hawk Inc.?
Well, they're all born and bred from skate culture, so already it's pretty irreverent. And I feel like there's a lot of continuity in between the brands and the aesthetics and the values of what we do. And so I feel like there's a lot of, I hate to use the word, but there's a lot of synergy there. And I think that it's more instinctual for me. If it's something I want to get involved in, I realize, is there a fit there somehow? An example is I've been working with Mini Cooper for the last few years. And ways to incorporate Mini with skateboarding was pretty seamless for me. I mean, I feel like their cars are of the same sort of attitude of skaters. They're small and they're versatile and they fit families. And I use, my kids got to be in a Mini commercial with me, and then we got to go skate this water park that was empty, and that kind of stuff is like I never dreamed was possible.
That sounds like a lot of fun. So when you look back at your career and at the advice or at the sort of blessing you got from your mentor at the time, what advice would you have given to your 21-year-old self, or however old you were at the time?
Oh, that's a good question. I get asked that quite a bit, and usually I say that I would tell myself to keep control of my brand, because I not lost control. I signed away control of my name and likeness early on when I was like 19, 20, to all kinds of different companies. In fact, a lot of conflicting and overlapping contracts, but I didn't know any better. And they all could use my name however they saw fit, and they were putting it on really crappy products and terrible imagery. And I went to complain one time, and they said, well, so what? We have full rights to do this. And I didn't realize that I had given up those rights. Fast forward to about 10 years later when I got the opportunity to do that again, and I learned from my mistakes. So I wouldn't go tell myself not to do that, because I had to go through that hard lesson. I think if I were to tell myself anything, I'd say, if you find yourself on a TV show wearing a monkey costume, don't try to do a full loop without a helmet.
I'll try to remember that one.
It's good, really good advice across the board, anyone out there, because you'll end up with a broken hip and a concussion.
It must have been very weird to all of a sudden find your face and your name everywhere at such a young age. What was that like?
It was weird. Well, it was weird because skateboarding was so small when I first started. You couldn't aspire to be rich or famous from it. No one got into it because they thought this is my ticket to celebrity. It was more like you did it because you found something that spoke to you, and you found like-minded people, and you were all weirdos. Everyone were kind of outcasts, and at some point, if you reached an age of responsibility, you had to quit because you had to find a job. There was no career opportunity in it. So the weird thing for me was to be thrust into the spotlight, especially when I was a teenager, when skateboarding started to take off, and it was like, why do you want my autograph? That's so strange. I mean, even to this day, there's an element of that for me where it's like, why are you on stage talking to a group of people like me with your life experience? But I was honored to be able to be in that position, and I think that I learned more through having kids, really how to connect with kids, obviously, but also just how to be approachable. And when I was a kid, I was just so awkward. People thought I was standoffish, and I was just like, I don't know what to do. I don't really understand how you're supposed to be. There was no training or marketing tools like that.
Well, what about this idea of being an entrepreneur? At what point, you have a clothing line. Now, of course, you have this billion-dollar video game franchise. At what point were you like, okay, I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to start my own business. I want to start a bunch of businesses. And when did you start thinking of yourself that way?
I think it was around the time we started the clothing line. That's when I thought, wow, there are many other things that are possible with skateboarding's popularity. And that's around the time when I decided I was going to quit competing so that I really could chase those opportunities. It was weird. I guess it was more becoming a businessman by default, because I was the one putting up the risk, putting up the money to start these new ventures. But one of them was it was a tour we did for a few years called the Boom Boom Huck Jam. It was an arena tour. It was skateboarding, BMX, motocross, and live music. It was kind of like X Games as a show, as a huge entertainment show, as opposed to a competition. Because we had a lot of routines and we incorporated the music, but that became a product. And we were licensing skateboards and bikes through that license and that name long after the tour was over. And I guess that's when I realized, this is a business, even though for me it was just a super awesome, fun tour that I got to create.
Yeah, and when you were like, okay, this is a business, did you seek out any business mentors or read any business books or partner with anyone who became sort of your business partner on these things, or was it always sort of an organic evolution?
A little bit of both. My sister came from the entertainment industry. She was actually a successful singer through the 80s, and then she had kids and wanted to stay home. And as my life started to sort of transition into entertainment as opposed to just skateboarding. She understood that world, so she became my business partner, and she still is to this day. But I think it was more, I think it was just more looking at opportunities, seeing what would fit, and I don't know, it's been, it still to this day amazes me that we get to do it, that I still get to skate for a living.
Yeah, that's awesome. And travel the world in the process. Tell me a little bit about this idea of being a diversified business, but avoiding being stretched too thin. Because you have your fingers in all sorts of different pots, some more so at some times than others. But why was it important to do lots of different things?
Well, I think that, like to your earlier question, I really started to surround myself with people I trusted in their chosen fields, but also that had the same sense of ideals. So like when we did the tour, I partnered up with someone who did rock arena tours, and they understood that world. You know, we were just coming from like, oh, we're the special guests at the halftime show, and we're going to bring in our ramp and do our little thing. And it was like, no, you guys are booking arena tours. You guys have to do the marketing. You guys have to be on the radio and do all these other things. And so that's when I started to learn to trust other people as experts in their field. And that's when it became more diverse. But also I embraced learning all of those things as well. You know, because you don't want to get into those types of other businesses you don't understand and still remain naive to all of it.
So how do you avoid getting stretched too thin when you're doing so many different things? How do you make sure there's?
I surround myself with a group of people that I feel like have the same sense of values and come from the same culture, and so things don't get to me until they've been vetted pretty deeply.
And have there ever been times when you thought this is too much, I need to pull back or shut some part of the business down?
Yeah, almost every day. No, I think sometimes I won't take a project on because I feel like I just can't devote myself enough to it to make it what I would be proud of and make it something that has integrity. And that's one of the hardest things you learn as being successful is to say no.
So any examples or times when you didn't say no and you wish you had, or you said no is really hard?
Well, I mean, just in terms of the celebrity aspect, saying no to, you know, red carpets and movie screenings and trips and cruises and things like that. That's hard, but you realize like that's not what your priority should be, and especially having kids. You know, I want to have quality time with them, and I don't want to just keep chasing this carrot.
And so, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
So I think that what I've come to realize is I truly love skateboarding. I love the skate culture. I love the team that I've created. And that is my priority. Even if that's not the most lucrative, that's what I'm enjoying the most. And the fact that I still get to do what I love for a living, that's my measure of success.
When you look back at your career, what do you think has been your biggest mistake? Other than when you signed up all your rights and you had to see your face on things you didn't.
That definitely hovers around number one. That's a good question. I think that I learned early on, like in this sort of second wave of success, that a lot more is at stake, and there's a lot more eyes on it. Social media, hello, and to be just more considerate. And I think one of the last things I did that I felt like was maybe outside of my bounds of what I wanted to be doing, and my integrity was askew, was just before sort of the rise of X Games. I think it was on 96, 97. I was asked to do a promotion for Fruit Loops, which is fine. I ate them. My kids still eat them sometimes. So I have that. But they had this sort of media training for us. And the whole idea was that Toucan Sam had become extreme, and he skates, and he rides bikes, and he rock climbs, and we had to speak of him as a real person thing that really likes doing these things. And that was our media training, and at some point in my head I was like, I don't want to do this. This is not, you know, I mean, it was for me, it was a lot of money for this promotion. They sent me to New York and they set us up and whatnot. But at some point I realized like, this isn't how I want to approach my career again.
Cannot be referring to Toucan Sam as a real person. That seems.
Yeah, and like that we're bros with him. He'll be on the ramp with us later.
Too much.
We made it our own. I mean, it was, we had a fun time, but they brought in a whole busload of kids from a school all wearing Fruit Loops t-shirts, so it got weird.
Yeah. Speaking of kids, philanthropy is now a big part of what you do. And you're really committed to building skate parks and making sure that kids everywhere get the opportunity to skate. Why is philanthropy so important, particularly right now?
Well, the least I could do is give back to this community that gave me everything. And I feel like the reason I started the foundation was in response to the growing interest in skateboarding and how prolific it had become, and the serious lack of facilities, and more so the lack of facilities in the more challenged areas, in the more low-income areas. I thought I have at least a voice and a recognition factor that I can affect some change in that way, and I decided to start a foundation and figure out how to direct that funding and how to direct that awareness. I think the first injection, the seed money for the foundation came from my appearance on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire.
That's awesome. So I guess the question is, do you have any advice for entrepreneurs about how they can weave philanthropic interests into their jobs and and sort of their day-to-day business?
Well, I think it's got to be a cause you truly believe in, that affects you, or that has affected you, or that you're passionate about. It can't just be, it's for charity, it's for kids. That's my pet peeve. Just give us money, it's for charity. Like, okay, how do we quantify that? Where is that money going? How can you prove that your money is actually being used for something that is charitable? The good thing about our foundation is that we literally have concrete evidence of our work.
And do you feel like your foundation has allowed you to better understand sort of the interests and needs and demands of the next generation of skaters?
Yeah, and I'd like to think so. And the idea that communities, especially kids, can actually affect change. That if they believe in their project and if they jump through all the hoops of bureaucracy and whatnot, that they can get something done. We give them the resources and the tools to do that. The idea that our foundation just picks a city and we sprinkle magic dust and voila, you have a skate park, and then we all congratulate ourselves, that's not what our model is. Our model is empowering the community that has actually started the project on their own, from whatever, bake sales, petitions, going to city council meetings, and then we give them funding and we give them resources to get it pushed through the red tape.
You mentioned social media earlier. How do you think about social media and making sure that you're always staying relevant? I mean, things change so quickly. It feels like every year there's a new app or a new platform or new marketing, means to reach people. How do you stay abreast of everything and keep ahead?
I watch the skaters like that they hang out with and my team, and I kind of watch what they're interested in. I mean, that's truly how I first got on Instagram. They always say that like I was the first athlete on Instagram. No, it was my team were some of the first skaters on Instagram, and I saw how well they were using it. But for the most part, I just try to I try to pick the ones that I feel like resonate the most, that are the most fun, that can be the most interactive. I think I've learned through a lot of trial and error what has more engagement. And I hate using that word because I'm not just looking at it through numbers. I really just want it to be fun.
So what does have the most engagement?
Giving stuff away. That always works.
Yeah, I can imagine. But this idea of staying ahead, not just in social media, but thinking about what the next thing is, the next business or the next product. How do you think about staying nimble? Is it back to the skaters and the guys you're?
A little bit, yeah, but also as a business, it's so challenging right now. I mean, just in terms of the challenges of selling online, brick and mortar, and we're releasing a video on Friday. My team, Birdhouse Saturdays. Hello, anyone want to buy it?
But it's what, 12:01 Friday morning?
What's that? Yeah, we've been working on it for 3 years. I'm hugely proud of it. In fact, everything I've been doing in the last few weeks is just gearing up to that release, and we haven't released a video in 10 years. I don't know, I didn't know how it works anymore. I didn't know that we had to submit it to iTunes and Amazon and Google Play like 6 weeks ahead of time. I thought it was digital, like, here's the video, go sell it. And so I'm learning a lot in this process, but again, I'm not frustrated by it. I want to embrace all that and learn more and how to be more effective with the video and how we do it. But it's a strange time for commerce, and you got to be nimble.
For the folks here who are in the retail space or the e-tail space, what's your advice to navigating it? I mean, we were talking backstage about how your brand is owned by Walmart. Obviously, Amazon is the behemoth that's crushing most everyone in retail these days. What are you seeing?
Well, we're not owned by Walmart yet.
I'm sorry. You said no, but
we're in Walmart Canada.
You're in Walmart.
The clothing.
Yes, the clothing. Sorry.
But yeah, if Walmart US wants to take our clothing too, please hit me up. How do you? It's super challenging. I would say just be agreeable to the idea of change and the idea of fast change. And with our skate brand, we make new decks very quickly. We cater to the needs of skaters and we listen to them. I mean, that's the best thing about social media for me is immediate feedback, even though sometimes it's raw and kind of mean. That they give you their honest opinion and it's what they want to see, and you can't just be forcing something down their throats. And so I appreciate that, and I think that the best way is just to embrace change, and don't fight the old ways.
I love hearing you talk about being nimble, because of course you have to be nimble when you're skateboarding. And the other thing that's interesting as an entrepreneur is that you have to take risks as a skateboarder. I mean, what you do is just mind-boggling, watching your amazing feats, but so much of what you do as an entrepreneur is also taking risks. How do you think about risk-taking, and what would your advice be to other entrepreneurs?
Well, I think that's the one thing that carried me through from skating to being an entrepreneur is being willing to take risks and being willing to know when the risks are too great. And I think at some point you realize you can't be so far upside down that you're ever really going to get back to being profitable, and sometimes you got to cut your losses. And we have done that, and I've done it in the past, and it's a bummer, but you've got to stay profitable, obviously. I think, but yeah, I love, even now I love the adrenaline of taking risks and seeing it through. Sometimes it takes a lot of setbacks to get there, not just financially, but in terms of acceptance.
What do you mean by that?
Well, in terms of skating, my style of skating was largely chastised all through my formative years. People thought what I was doing was more circus tricks and robotic, and everything else was about, the Dogtown boys and surfing and slashing and style. And it's not that I didn't like that type of skating. It just wasn't. I was a scrawny runt, like I was wearing literally elbow pads on my knees because I was so small. And it's just not how I could skate. So I kind of formed my own style and figured out my own way to get airs and found some people that I liked that were into also creating tricks. And we just forged ahead because we loved it too much. And we weren't trying to gain acceptance. We just wanted to keep skating. And I guess that's, if I could liken anything to business, it was like, no, we had our MO, we had our product, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And we just kept reinventing it.
We're going to open up to questions in 1 second, so please tweet in your questions. My final question for you before we do that is, looking back at your career since you were that scrawny kid, what is your sort of most defining moment of success when you realized you had really made it?
Oh, wow. Well, I think I had a couple in the 80s that I thought were like the biggest things ever. I mean, like winning the whole National Skateboard Association series for the first time, my first year out as a pro. I thought, like, that's it, and then suddenly I was making six figures in high school, and I was like, this will never end. It ended so fast in my 20s that I didn't see it coming. I had 2 mortgages, I had a child on the way, and it was like, what just happened? What happened? Like, we were killing it. But in terms of success, I think the time when I realized like that the success was way more than I would ever have dreamed is when I had a meeting with Activision. This is after our fourth game was released. I had a meeting with them, and they said, yeah, so just so you know, we're releasing this fourth game. The last 3 are still top 10 sellers. And then they were telling me like what kind of royalty checks I'll be getting. And I was like, that's not even real money. I've never heard of anything like that. I think that was sort of, for me, that was the tipping point. It was just like, this is bigger than anyone ever imagined or could have imagined, especially when I was growing up.
Yeah, certainly an iconic brand. So here we have a question from Jenna Bakey. It's, what's the takeaway from skating you always have used that carries over to your business?
That perseverance is key. And following your passion. I think that if I set out to create, like for instance, this video that we're releasing, and I'm not trying to keep promoting it, just it is the most current thing that I've done. And I set out to make this video, there's no guarantee of income from it. I put several $100,000s into the production of it, and I believe in it. I love it. I'm hugely proud of it. I don't know if anyone's going to watch it that doesn't skate. It's got some funny stuff in it, and I don't know if it's really going to affect our sales that greatly. But I just believe in it so much that I feel like something is there that's bigger than just a skate video, and I'm gonna take that risk.
Well, you probably have a lot of people listening very excited to see it now. Question from Mia. Hi, Tony Hawk. Can you talk about the early stages of your career and the most important lesson you learned?
Well, the early stages of my career, like I said, it was hard because I was doing a sport that was already considered an outcast activity. It was like the furthest thing from cool you could do when I started. And then my style was not the cool style, so I was an outcast in an outcast activity. And so I learned to ignore haters early on, which really, I think, set the tone for me in terms of forging my own way in business and like even in social media. Like, people, they go in social media and their souls are crushed from the hate and the comments. And I'm like, I had that to my face when I was 13. Like, I'm good. You can't hide behind your username.
David Chow asks, being out of the skate competition limelight, how do you maintain the brand value of the name Hawk, especially with the younger generation?
Well, firstly, by still being in the mix, obviously still skating, but also having a team that I support that is very much relevant and contemporary and progressive. I think it's just really being in the mix. Like I go on tour with those guys. I'm right there with them, and so I understand modern skateboarding.
And therefore can create products for modern skateboarding.
Right.
How has promoting skating and extreme sports changed now that kids and teens have so many distractions with tech? Other than making video games.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's always that idea that like there's too many distractions. Well, like when my game was huge, obviously, people would say like, that's keeping kids off of skateboards. Like actually, not that many kids were skating when we released our video game. It's bringing kids into skateboarding. It's inspiring them to try. So I feel like, especially with social media and so-called distractions, if anything, there's your outlet to show what you're doing and maybe to get recognized when you're not from a place where skateboarding is affluent.
Great. Bob Mound asks, if you never touched a skateboard, what would you be doing?
I picked up computers very early on. I learned how to do nonlinear editing, like on an Amiga toaster. Anyone? Yes, I'm not old. And so I think I would have done something in that space because I was sort of ahead of the curve in the 90s of learning how to do video stuff. And I still I even edited some of the video. I'm not going to take full credit, but some of the video coming out.
Another teaser for the video coming out.
Are you sick of it yet?
Yeah.
Let's just show it. You know what?
Do we have time for one more question? Here we go. Aaron, oh, whoops, we just lost it. Can we go back to the last one? There we go. Aaron Cosarelli, how many assistants do you have? Seriously, how do you balance being an entrepreneur, running a business, and family time? The life-work balance question, which I Should have already asked.
Well, I have many children. I wish I could say they're my assistants, but I'm their assistant for the most part. I have 2 people that work full-time for me at my office, but mostly they're just dealing with the chaos of travel and scheduling and things like that. I mean, literally, when people ask me if I could do something, I go, you should ask Seth because he knows my schedule before I do. But for the most part, I am the one in control. I'm the one who says yes or no, and I'm the one who figures out if it's worth my time, because that's the most valuable commodity I have these days.
I'm sure that is true for many entrepreneurs in the room as well. Tony, thank you so much for taking this time, especially ahead of your big video coming out. We really appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you.
Hey there, thanks for checking out CNBC on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all of the day's biggest stories. You can also click on any of the videos around me to watch the latest from CNBC. Thanks for watching.